recording the event now. Welcome everyone to our Product Buds Product Sense case study event. And we are so excited to see, wow, 115 product buds at this event. That's incredible. Give yourself all a huge pat on the back for taking the initiative to really advance your product management knowledge, because it definitely takes a lot of time and dedication to become a PM, but you all are already one step ahead in your product careers. So definitely be proud of yourself for that. My name is Grace, and I'm one of the co-founders of Product Buds, alongside with Henrika, David, Milop, and my other team members, Darsh, and Joseph, and Phyllis, and Benjamin, and Sarah, and Randy, and Lynn. I just want to give them all credit because they've all pitched in to really build this community so much. And in terms of Product Buds, I'm sure you all know who we are, but if you don't, Product Buds is a community designed to sprout, grow, and flourish the next generation of product managers through a variety of different initiatives, including a PM book club, PM side projects, mock interviews, and case studies, and much more coming down the line. So we're very excited to have already surpassed 1,300 members in less than 2 months, and we're very excited to see you all continue to grow. And so with that being said, we are so excited to be presenting this case study workshop with Kenton Kivestu, CEO and founder of RocketBlocks, and he also was previously at Google, Zynga, and Flurry, building amazing products there. So I'll give the stage to Kenton to make his introduction.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. As Grace mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of RocketBlocks, which is an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews. Of course, we handle product management interviews, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I'm really excited to chat about that. And also, as Grace alluded to, before that, I worked in product management at Google, Zynga, and Flurry, building all sorts of different products, everything from ads products on the Google side to mobile games on the Zynga side. And I'm really excited to jump into this Product Sense case study, but I'll let Darsh say a few quick words before I jump in.
Thank you, Kenton. So as everybody might have read in our announcements, product sense or product case studies is a topic that often comes in product management interviews. But even apart from interviews, it is something called as an intuition or product judgment that you can call. You know how you start driving, learning how to drive. And once you drive a lot, you kind of get a judgment on where to take left, right, when to speed up. So product sense is something similar. As you practice it more and more, it comes naturally to you. And just imagine being in an interview where you don't have to freak out, like all those case study design questions, and it's just come naturally to, oh yeah, I can solve this in my sleep. So that's the aim of our product case study initiative. We want to inculcate like casual learning on how PMs think, and that's our attempt today. And we have an amazing speaker, Kenton. He's really good at what he does. And a fun fact, I don't know how many of you might be interested in poker, but if you are interested in poker, you might have heard the name Zynga Poker. So Kenton is the PM who worked on that game when it was on its boom in 2013 and 2014 kind of year. So yeah, that's a really good thing to know about Kenton. And we'll be taking Q&A at the end of the session. And the tag you can use on slido.com is buds. My team members and me would be pushing up the link in our group chat. But apart from that, we hope you really like this session. And yeah, Kenton, take it away.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that introduction and setting the stage. And I think one thing before I even jump in and get started that I want to reiterate, which Darsh pointed out, which is so true and so important, is that product sense, product judgment, product intuition, it might seem intimidating at first, but it is something that you will build over time. And like anything else, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. It will get easier and easier, I promise. It can seem a little intimidating and sometimes befuddling at first, but it'll get better over time. So of course, we're going to be focusing on product sense in this case study. And oops, one second. Why won't my slides advance? There we go. Okay. So what we're going to cover is we are going to do one specific product sense case question, and we're going to really drill in on that question and spend the entire time reviewing it and thinking about it in a few different ways. And as we go through it, we want it to be, I want it to be an interactive problem solving approach. So we're going to go through this question, but we're actually going to do it multiple times. And the purpose of that is to sort of see a few different approaches of solving the same product sense question and building that intuition, building that product argument, and taking us from sort of a meh answer that's sort of okay to something that's a great answer by the end of it. And then when we get to the end of it, we're going to compare and contrast those answers a little bit and look at them on a few key dimensions and really just try and hammer home what is the difference between an answer that's sort of, yeah, it was okay, versus something that's like, great, let's give him or her an offer. That's an awesome answer to this question. And then the last thing I'll say before we jump in is that product sense is a skill set that is tested, thoroughly in the interviews. But it's also, the reason it's tested in the interviews is because it matters so much on the job. When you get on the job, you're going to be using this skill on a daily basis. So along with your analytical abilities and your technical skills and your ability to communicate effectively and to lead a team, one of the core sort of tenets and skill sets that you will need to succeed on the job is product sense. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. What's going on with my slides here? Okay, there we go. So the question that we're going to be focusing on is this. Imagine you are a newly minted product manager and you're working at Google and you have been tasked with an important new project to think about designing a Google Meet product specifically for university professors. So before we jump into this question and start dissecting it, the key sort of background I want to provide. So for folks that aren't familiar with Google Meet yet, it is essentially Google's Zoom product. So very similar to the product we're using. It is a video conferencing product. It has a lot of similar functionality. And this is what we're going to be talking about. And specifically here, as you can tell, we're looking about, should we design a version of this product that is designed and tailored toward university professors? So the first thing I want to do is, as you think about this question, start by shouting out in the chat here, what are some of the key things? Like if you face this question either in the interview or on the job, what are some of the key things that you would start thinking about? And feel free to just shout them out in the chat. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat, and then we're going to talk through a few of these. Okay, lots of good stuff coming in. How many students? Is it undergrad or MBA? User needs, what are they tracking? What are they currently using? What are they using Meet for? Oh my gosh, subjects, features, whiteboard, clinical or tenured, interesting. You guys are really killing it on the class participation here. Subject area, okay. So a ton of good stuff, This is really great. A+ on participation. This is more than I was even expecting. So I think one of the things, just looking at as all the things that you guys just put into the chat, imagine that you were actually the candidate sitting in an interview and maybe not all of those items you threw out, because I think there were literally like 100 comments that just flew by on the screen. But imagine you threw out like 10 of those and you just started talking through all of these different questions. That would sort of be like a throw everything at the wall approach. It might look like this. I think we covered probably every single one of those topics in there, and certainly more of them. But it would be this approach where you're just saying, you're just almost throwing everything you can think of at the wall. And it's a good starting place, but it's not necessarily the most structured approach to thinking through this problem, nor might it be the clearest approach. And if you think about clarity in a product management context, both in the interview, when you're going through these type of questions, you want to be clear so that the interviewer understands what you're talking about, what your approach is, so that he or she can follow along and really understand your insights. And then when you're on the job, if you're thinking about a million different things and trying to communicate a million different things as well, it's easy to lose your team and for them to lose track of what you're focused on, what you're prioritizing. So you want to think about all this stuff, but if you end up presenting it like this in an interview, it's going to be a little bit disjointed. So the second thing I want us to take a look at the same question again, and this time let's try applying a framework. So why doesn't someone in the chat, or maybe if someone wants to unmute themselves and describe what the circles framework is, let's start with that. Does someone want to take a stab at describing circles?
Yeah, from my understanding, circle stands for comprehend, identify, relate, construct, list, explain, and then essentially think about success metrics and how to keep track of metrics.
Awesome. Okay. That's pretty darn close. I think it may be slightly off, but I think the sentiment is right. I wasn't actually sure who was speaking, but does someone want to take a stab at taking circles now that we've sort of defined what it is, basically a framework that you walk through? And the first step is comprehend the situation, identify the customer, report on the customer needs, cut, and this one's a little cheating on the acronym because cut, but it really means prioritize what those needs are, list solutions that will address those needs, evaluate the solutions, and then summarize the recommendation. So if we were going to take that approach, and that's essentially a framework that you can apply to a product sense or product design question, does someone want to take a stab at taking that framework and applying it to this Google Meet question that we're looking at here? Or maybe even just get us started. You don't have to go through the whole thing, but take us through, step 1 or step 2. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I can try to go ahead for this.
Go for it.
So when I think about circles, it's basically what comprehend the situation means is trying to make sense and try to get more data points how you can structure your answer. So in this case, I would try to limit the scope a bit and try to ask is this product only for United States or is this product global?
Okay, got it. So you're trying to narrow down the scope of what you're focusing on. What other things might you want to know to just sort of put things in context and understand the situation?
Go ahead.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
I think
yeah, I was thinking maybe another thing you can think about is what kind of users would be using this particular thing? Or I get it, it's university professors, but are there any particular groups within university professors that we might want to target before expanding to the whole user group?
Got it. Okay, cool. There is someone in chat, Faiza, do you want to talk about your idea around which university professors are using it? What's your thought there? Or not? Okay.
So, I'd like to take a take on that. So, yeah, in terms of comprehending the situation, I think I'll think about the context, as in what's the context that the professors want to use the product and why.
Okay.
Now, in terms of now that I know it's the professor, I would want to identify the persona and understand, probably the demographics or where they come from, how comfortable are they with, a communication platform technology, have they used it before, and would it require, just understanding the persona of the professor. and then classify them into different groups. So in this situation, I would think about, in terms of university, the different the professors from different departments, and then maybe classify them in that sort of area.
Got it. Okay, so you're going to try and segment the customers a little bit.
Correct.
Okay, cool. And then, how would you think about once you've segmented those customers, how would you think about sort of discovering what their actual needs are?
One option would be through a survey itself, or having send out a survey and trying to understand what the pain point is, and then trying to discover if there's a pattern in each of those segments and clusters, and then look at the most pressing problem and see how that would affect, move the needle positively to the most important KPI that I'm managing.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we can use the survey and use the previous Google Meet product as a baseline and figure out what extra features or what other drawbacks of the previous product is, and try to go out from there.
Got it. Okay. Okay, cool.
I actually have, sorry. I actually have, I guess, like a different opinion on that. I think we shouldn't start from like the existing product, because from my understanding, Google Meet right now is probably better for smaller scale meetings, because every time like I use it, as long as there are like more than 10 people, the quality becomes a little bit off sometimes. And so maybe we want to like think about how big of the classes we want to accommodate, because I go to a really big public university, and a lot of our classes can go all the way to above 1,000 people, or like even 1,500 people. So if we want to accommodate like that size of classes, then we might need to even like change the tech stack. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Great point.
But couldn't that problem be easily be fixed by server? Adding more server to that thing. That's not a direct product problem. Just asking a question.
Well, it sort of depends. There's a few things, right? Like, so I didn't catch the name of who was speaking before, but if you're talking about, say, like a 500-person class, right, and trying to teach that virtually, some of the challenges you might face would be in nature probably very different than they would be teaching, say, a 15 or 20-person class. Because one is like a big lecture hall, maybe like a 101 style class, whereas one might be sort of small discussion and debate. And so maybe some of the challenges there are different, both in terms of the product and how that should work, but also in terms of, like what is the technical capability to support that product? You need to support 500 or 1,000 concurrent streams, or 15 or 20. That's a component of the problem as well, for sure.
I also wanted to add that, in the comprehend situation phase, I would also look into understanding why is Google wanting to design this product? What outcome are they hoping to achieve through this?
Yep.
Is it a retention strategy or a growth strategy? And that would also determine the process and the framework I'd adapt.
Yep, I think that is a very good thing to focus on. I agree with that. Let me look through just some of the things people are calling out in the chats too as well that I think are interesting. So one thing that someone mentioned that we were just talking about is how big are the classes are we accommodating? Again, what type of professors, right? What type of products are they currently using? I think that's an interesting point that gets to, what are the competitive products out there? What's already working? Why is Google interested in doing so? Target metrics. How about, tell me, is anyone thinking about, aside from the class sizes, and maybe this came up in chat, but I missed it already, what are some of the needs that these customers would have? Like, what do they actually need to accomplish with this product? How would you guys think about that?
Yeah, hi, I have something to add on that. So I was thinking about, is the need about having an in-class experience just taken out of that and put it up in an online product? That is that what the need that is missing, or is it more of trying to get everybody on the same platform and make it without any technology issues? Is that the need that's most bothering people?
Okay, let me make sure I'm trying to understand. So the need of getting everyone on the same platform versus what was the former one? How would you classify that?
Yeah, is it more of an experience that they're trying to optimize, like maybe the one that's like shout outs, or is it more of a classroom experience out of that is generally there that they want to bring it up into the online world?
Yeah, okay, great. So like, do they want to build interaction into the product? Like, is the issue that they can't run a poll, or maybe have a concurrent sort of chat, or people tagging things as they're going through and presenting?
Yeah, or calling out or shouting out for each other. Is that what they're trying to achieve, or that is the need of the hour, or is it more about getting everybody and making sure that there are no technology hassles between the lecturer and the students for imparting knowledge? Is that what the need of the hour is?
Got it. Yep, that makes sense. And then if we think about, okay, so let's recap where we are. We've talked a little bit about comprehend, like what is this actual problem we're trying to solve. We've talked a little bit about, identifying the customers. These are university professors, but people rightly pointed out, okay, well, what segment of university customers, what style? We've talked a little bit about their needs. How about thinking about prioritizing? Like how would, once we've got these different needs, like how would someone think about prioritizing those different issues?
I think that would depend based on the metrics and our comprehension of the situation. I've seen some really cool propositions in the chat, such as communication and accessibility, based on the metrics that we've decided and based on the user pain points. After we've listed solutions, we could cut them down and like prioritize on a subset of the solutions.
So, yeah, Simran here again. So I would want to add to that. That's a good point. Just want to add that I'll probably think of a framework where I can divide this into two metrics of effort versus the impact, and then put in the pain points under these 4 buckets, and first target what would the highest impact, and then use the low impact, low effort as fillers in the process of development. So first think about the highest impact and highest effort as well, and then so on. Go through the matrix in that order.
Got it. Okay, cool. This is great. So we've covered a ton of stuff, and we've basically gone through all of the steps of circles, with the exception of we didn't go through the summarize part, but we've gone through that and we've sort of checked off those boxes. And now we've taken the same question, right, that we started with, and we applied a framework to it, right? We basically did this. We did comprehend, we identified the customers, we talked about some of the needs, talked about how we'd prioritize them, potential solutions, how you make some of those trade-offs. So this is a framework, and it's a way that you can walk through any sort of product sense question. You could take circles and apply it to this question like we did. You could apply it to a question like, how would you design a refrigerator for blind people? Or how would you design a new playground for kids? You could take it and basically apply it to any question. That's part of the strength of a framework like this, is that it is a checklist that you can essentially walk through. Now, the downside of using something like this is that circles, as we've talked about, is something that everyone knows. Likely, if you didn't know it on this call already, now you know it. And your interviewer probably knows it. So if you walk into an interview and they give you a question like this and you say, well, I'm just gonna walk through the circles method, one of the things that will probably pop into your interviewer's mind is, well, maybe there's some interesting insights here, but this is just sort of like a canned framework. How do I know that this person is really uniquely thinking about the problem that we presented versus just sort of recalling this framework they memorized and just sort of walking through it in a rote fashion? So that's the downside of it. It's a lot better than where we started, right? Where we just like heard the question and we threw out every single thing we could think of, and you know, just throw everything at the wall and see where it goes. So it's a good start, but there's a step just a little bit further that I think we can even do better. So let's go to that. So third approach I want us to take is let's think about all these different issues we're talking about, all the different things we want to consider, and let's try and bucket them together and highlight what we think the top, let's say 4 at max. What are the top 4 things we need to look into to solve this specific question? So not any other product design question, but this particular one that's been posed to us. So for some of the folks, either some of the folks that have already chatted in or some new folks that want to pipe in, if you think about this and taking the same problem now saying, okay, there's 4 sort of key buckets I'm going to investigate to try and get to a good answer on this question, which ones would you prioritize?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yep. So if we're going to attack this product design question that we're thinking about, and you want to propose sort of a framework for walking through it, and you say, okay, these are the 4 like key areas that I want to investigate to get to an answer, what would those 4 key areas be? And there's no right answer. It's just, hey, instead of taking something like circles and walking through it, let's just say, here's my own sort of mental model for thinking through a problem like this. So we've got anyone chatting in on this? I think that last note, let's see. Okay. Daniela's got a good answer. Maggie, either Daniela or Maggie, do you want to talk through your framework?
Yeah, so mine, I don't have my 4th bucket yet, but yeah, I would first start with figuring out what the university professors actually want, looking at their specific needs, you know, everything that we've talked about, whether this is going to be throughout the span of coronavirus, are we looking at this very long term, just getting a more solid idea of what they actually need and the environment that they're working within, things like that. Secondly, I would go through what they're currently using and what the limitations are on that, what the costs are on that, things like that. And then thirdly, prioritizing what we can actually provide and how that would fit within our company's own portfolio.
Okay, awesome. I love it. Three buckets, pretty clear. What are the needs? What are the limitations of their current solutions? And what would you prioritize on addressing? That's great. Does anyone else have a framework they want to propose?
Yeah, mine is pretty similar. What I said would be make sure that I align everything with the product strategy and the company strategy as well. Second of all, I would make sure I fully understand my customers, who is the user, specify the pain points they have, really go deep in there. Then I would, based on that, I would prioritize also having in mind, maybe, I don't know, let's think about monetization as well. So we would have to factor that in as well. And then fourth, the impact that will generate and the metrics we can gather from that to the next, just to improve the next iteration.
Great. I love it. Awesome. Okay. I've got a framework I'm going to propose as well. But before I jump to that, does anyone else want to throw out a framework? I love the 2 we've got so far.
Yeah, I guess you want to go?
We'll take one more.
That's okay, go ahead.
Okay, so for me, what I was thinking was I just used 3 frameworks as well. So one was the customer problem. So I will thoroughly understand what are the needs of the customer. Then also at the same time, I want to do what's a business need that we are trying to achieve. And then I think I have a third, that's a value proposition, what we will be adding for that customer need, actually like a segue between customer problem and the business need, how we can bridge that two things. That would be three things we're looking at.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, cool. So we've got 3 frameworks, 2 ones with 3 key buckets, 1 with 4, and both of them, you know, not both of them, all 3 of them touch on some similar topics, right, that we covered in circles. And certainly they touch on topics that we covered in that first approach where we just threw everything at the wall. But all of these, you know, they're much more streamlined, right? And they're specifically trying to attack this particular problem and understanding, you know, how do we actually think about this and, you know, design our way through this and figure out a good approach here. So I love it. I'm going to skip ahead and talk about a framework that I propose. And you're going to notice that it looks very similar to some of the stuff that you guys just mentioned. The first thing that I'll call out that is a little bit different is I've framed the entire sort of question and said, okay, what is the key thing we're trying to do here? And I think one of the things that is really helpful here is when you move away from like a canned framework, like something like circles, you can actually make sure that you frame the particular problem-solving exercise and design exercise around the particular question you've got. So the prompt was around thinking about designing a Google Meet product for professors. Embedded in that, you know, if you go down the path of circles, you may just start designing that solution initially, but you may even want to take a step back and think about, is the premise of this question right? Should we even design Google Meet for professors? Does that make sense? It's something you probably want to keep in the back of your mind and really think about. So that's the first thing. Let's frame the question as, should we build and design a Meet product for professors? Then second thing I want to start with is, or first bucket, is what are our goals? And a few people in their frameworks mention this, but at a company level, how does this fit into what Google's trying to do? Does it fit with our company mission? Does it fit with our overall company objectives and OKRs for the year? And then a step further down, does it fit within the product organization that we're within? Does this, you know, does building something specifically for professors make sense in terms of Meet's overall strategy? Like if Meet's internal strategy is, hey, you know, we're really focused on business users and large enterprise clients, then taking a bunch of resources and engineers and time and spending it to develop a product specifically for professors may not make sense. However, if the education vertical is a huge focus, then yeah, that's great. We should spend some time and devote resources there. And then lastly, you know, what's the impact we're looking to have? What goals do we really care about? Are we trying to move the needle on revenue? Trying to move the needle on user growth? Are there other metrics that we care about? Are we trying to prevent, say, churn or prevent users from moving to a competitive product like Zoom, for example? So those are, I think, the things I would think about in this first bucket, which is what are our goals? The second thing that I would spend some time digging into is what are the segments of university professors and what are their key needs and pain points? So a lot of this stuff was covered in the chat. You know, are they teaching big classes or are they teaching small classes? Maybe the needs of professors that are, say, in the engineering school are different than the needs of professors that are teaching English. You know, maybe one has more materials they need to share or a lot of data that they need to share. And that means different needs for actually making a video conference product work. And then, okay, for those different segments, what are the actual pain points they face? I would imagine, I haven't been a professor myself, but one of the key things is probably how do you keep the students engaged and listening? How do you make sure that they're absorbing the information that you're sharing and that knowledge transfer is working? Someone alluded to this earlier, but how do you drive actual engagement in the classroom? How do you get people to sort of raise their hands virtually or, you know, take a poll and let people know whether they're, you know, whether they've learned like a lesson that was just taught or absorbed that material. Another thing that is a sort of big and increasing issue in the current world, you know, trying to do these presentations is, where is a user's attention? Is it on the person talking, like me here, waving my hands, or is it on the slide? And how does a professor that may have a situation that's dynamic and wants their attention to sometimes be on the slide, sometimes be on them, how do you make it work in a world like this, where you're presenting some slides, but maybe you want a more dynamic situation? So a bunch of things and sort of like pain points to think about, and you want to dig in and understand which of those issues really matter and which could you potentially solve. Okay, so next big thing is like, what are we actually going to build? Now that we've talked about what our goals are and what segments of customers exist and what their pain points are, what can we actually build to address it? And there's a few different, rungs you can think about this on the ladder. First of all, what's possible? What is our technology capable of building? What type of features can we build? How many users can we support? What does that whole range look like? And then once you've thought about what's possible, it's important to probably put a filter on and say, okay, what's critical? What do we absolutely need to have in this product to make it work? If you go and build, say, a lot of really cool advanced features about raising your hand and maybe interactive polls and switching between slides and yourself, or maybe overlaying the presenter on top of the slide, like say you build all that stuff and it's really great, but then the product doesn't support more than 100 streams concurrently, and a professor in the big lecture hall can't use it, and you were focusing on that type of user, then, well, it may not work out so well, right? So what's critical versus what's possible? And then as, a cherry on top, what are those great features that are going to make the product sing? What do you really want to put in there that is going to help make this product stand out, that's going to make users love it, that's going to make them say, wow. For a professor, one thing might be like, hey, like I just did this lecture, it auto-recorded, we ran some machine learning algorithms over it, and it tagged like the key things that were talked about, and then I can just press a button and it like uploads it to Blackboard, and it goes out to all the students that missed it, and it goes into the email and the syllabus, and then it goes on YouTube. I don't know, like maybe that's a great feature, maybe there's something like that we can talk about, and that's the type of thing we want to think about when we're talking about what are we actually going to build and deliver to these professors. And then the last thing is, how are we going to measure and iterate? How are we going to know that what we've designed actually works? It very rarely in the product management world will the V1 product actually be like the be all and end all. Usually you've got, V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. Chrome, I think, is on like version 39 at this point. So you're going to continually iterate on this product. And when you're designing it, one of the things you want to think about is, well, what metrics do we care about? What's going to help us know that we're either going in the right direction, or, hey, we need to pause and figure things out. So maybe it's, streams per day, or unique university professors using it, or total minutes consumed per day by the audience. There's a bunch of different things we could look at, and depending on our goals, we might prioritize those differently. Maybe there's even certain revenue metrics that we care about. But this is a framework, a targeted framework, that I might use to go through this question. And so hopefully you guys sort of see the difference between where we started, right? Where we were just throwing things at the wall, and a progression of throw everything at the wall, walk through things with a sort of canned framework that you know in advance, versus really trying to pick out what are the most salient issues, what matters most to solving this problem, and building a framework really targeted around that. So I think if you compare and contrast what we're doing, the three dimensions that I think really matter when you think about how we approach this product sense question are, is our answer structured? Is it focused? And does it bring some unique insight? So on the first row there, if we think about structured, the first answer we did was not structured at all. We just threw everything, right? It was like the kitchen sink, like I couldn't even keep up with chat. There was like 1 million messages that came through the chat that made it like run super quickly. So it was not particularly structured, nor was it focused. We just threw it all at the wall, right? It may have been unique. I mean, a lot of things did come out, and if you walk into an interview and just sort of throw everything on the table, you may end up with some unique stuff. But it's not going to sing as an overall answer. The second answer that we did, where we used the circles method, it's a better approach, right? It's structured for sure. Like there was a very clear checklist. We said, okay, we're going to comprehend, we're going to identify customers, we'll report on customer needs, cut and prioritize, etc. Was it focused? I would argue maybe it's more focused than what we did the first time. But at the same point, there are some, that question and that framework won't work for every question. And our question, we'd sort of already narrowed down who are the customers a decent amount. So if you were to use circles and say, okay, well, who are the customers? Oh, they're university professors. You're just wasting a little bit of your own time. Or you may get a product design question where someone tells you what the goal is up front. They say, we need to design product X that drives a 5% lift in revenue. In that case, the goal has already been set for you. That constraint has been put there. So putting forth a framework which then rehashes that doesn't make a ton of sense. Now, again, if you flip to the last answer we talked about, offer, this is where things all come together. You've got an answer that's structured. You've got an answer that's focused on what you think the key issues are that you need to solve. And it's unique. It's going to set you apart from other candidates and hopefully lead you to illuminating some unique insights about what is the right approach to this problem. And the last thing I'll say on this point, specifically on structured and focused, is that especially in the interviewing context, when you are going through these questions, it's really hard. The interviewer is going to be busy and distracted, him or herself. They're going to have their own things going on. Maybe they're running late to another meeting. Maybe they got a presentation they need to finish, etc. The more structured you can be as a candidate, the easier it's going to be for them to follow along and truly understand what your insights are, and remember what you said. And that is really, really helpful in that type of context. So that is the compare and contrast. That is our product sense case study. If you are starting to think about, okay, well, this is a good start, but how do I actually get better at this? Like Darsh mentioned, and we were talking about at the beginning, this is a skill. It gets better with practice. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more sort of creative you can get, and typically the deeper your insights will go as well. This is actually sort of the core reason that we started RocketBlocks. RocketBlocks is all about basically figuring out what matters in interviews, what skill sets actually matter, and giving you basically a digital gym to build and hone those particular skills. With the great product buds community that we've got here, we've put together a coupon. So if you're interested in RocketBlocks, there's a promo code at the bottom here, and I believe that it will be sent out in the Slack channel after this as well. And then for folks that are just getting started, we've got a ton of good free stuff as well. So we have a product management getting started guide online, takes you through what this job is all about, what the career path is like, what skills matter, what interviews are like, and it's got a bunch of quotes and insights and anecdotes from folks at Google, Lyft, Facebook, Amazon, et cetera, kind of peppered in there to give you a sense of what what those folks are going through on the job and how it relates. And then lastly, we've got a YouTube channel, also free as well. Obviously at RocketBlocks, we talk about a ton of this stuff, interviewing questions, career anecdotes, et cetera, and we've got a ton of good guests coming up on that as well in the next few weeks. So keep an eye on that. And now I will turn it over and we will do Q&A. Thank you guys for attending.
Thank you so much, Kenton. All that product sense brings back a lot of memories, and I think everybody in chat is showing you love. Thank you so much for guiding us through that product study. Even I think it was very interesting, the case study you took of university professors, because we sort of are in that setting right now. If we say you are the university professor, then it's quite relatable to all of us. And guys, check out RocketBlocks YouTube channel. It's really good and much relatable content, and will give you a sense of how interviews actually take place. And quickly moving on, we'll shift to our case study session. Kenton, you might have to stop sharing for that. Thank you.
Yep.
So I'll share my screen. Hope you all can see my screen now. So first question we have is from Anonymous. If all of us are applying the same framework and the thought process of solving case studies, how do you think we can differentiate ourselves from everyone else?
So that is a great question. Hopefully if that person who asked that was there through the end of the conversation, you'll see that I agree with you very much. I think circles and other frameworks are a good starting point, but really to excel, you want to go beyond that. So it's a good place to learn and to get the sort of high level approach there. But really what you want to do is what we were doing in that third step, where we said, okay, here's the problem, here's how I'm going to define it, and here's, for me, you know, the 3 or 4 key buckets that I'm going to analyze. And it doesn't always have to be 3 or 4. Like sometimes there may be 5, or sometimes you may have a question, right? And there's really two high level buckets, and you're going to break up the problem that way. For example, in like a product execution question where it's something like, hey, you know, the Instagram stories DAU is down 6% week over week, and your director has asked you to investigate. Wow, I mean, like anything could be going on, right? I might say, hey, my high level structure is there could be internal issues going on or external issues. External issues could be things like there's a big international holiday, or some of our services rely on AWS, which probably is not the case for Facebook, but like, hey, maybe they rely on AWS and AWS has gone down. There could be all sorts of external issues, right? We can investigate those. And then internal issues might be, you know, we had a feature release and there was a bug in there and that's causing an issue. Maybe our push notifications aren't working. Maybe we have changed internally how we're promoting products, and maybe the story bar that promotes Instagram stories got removed from the top of the Instagram app. Well, if that happened, a lot less people would probably check out stories every day. You know, that's an internal issue. So there's different frameworks that you can use, but what you want to make sure is that you're tailoring it to specifically to the question you heard. Like, to take that DAU question we were just walking through, if you said, well, I'm going to use circles for that, that's sort of crazy, right? Like that framework doesn't make sense for that question at all. Okay. Hopefully that answers that question.
Darsh, you're muted.
Yep, thanks for that. Yeah, Kenton, great answer. And I think it relates to what we are trying to do here in case study. Like, there are tons of frameworks out there. Circles is just like a one common example. But we have frameworks like ARM and different monetization frameworks. So keep following case studies for that. Our next question is, will RocketBlocks teach you everything for interviewing, from being a beginner, that is knowing nothing, to being fully prepared?
I think the answer is it will teach you a good bit, especially if you start with, say, like the Getting Started guide, which is totally free. We'll give you sort of the basics of what the career is all about, what skill sets matter, that type of stuff. And then, yeah, like, you know, RocketBlocks, the core product management interview prep is really sort of detailed drills on all the key skill sets that matter: product sense, technical ability, analytics, opportunity sizing. And for each of those, it is like a gym. Like, you can go in and drill down into those particular issues and do questions and see answers from experts. And they are detailed sort of expert questions. We have everyone from, you know, Stanford Business School students and undergrads using the product to directors of products, and sometimes we've had some VP of product people that are doing their first interview in 5 years, and even though they're obviously very skilled and have done well in their career, they're, you know, a little rusty on taking a product sense question and like digesting it in 5 minutes, something like that. So they use that to practice. So I think it could help you. And I would say, if you're on the beginner front, start with our YouTube channel, start with the Product Management Getting Started guide. That's free. That'll give you the introduction stuff. And then if you're progressing and you think it makes sense, you can look at the other stuff. Okay. Should I just jump to the next question, Darsh? I think
something is wrong with my mic, but yeah, we can go on to the next question, Kenton. How
Okay.
do you pick out the right points for your personalized structured framework?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think this is going to be a bit unsatisfying, but your intuition on this will build the more you do it. But I think, to give it maybe like a more pointed example, like thinking about the Google Meet question, right? If the question is, say, around designing a product, like how are you going to design and build this product, there are certain issues that it would be really hard for you not to touch on at all. So you should start building this mental map of relationships. So if someone tells you, hey, we need you to design a product for the first time, it would be really hard for you not to discuss anything about customers or customer segments if they've already told you the high level customer, and features and pain points and what needs you're going to solve, right? Like you can't just talk about goals and metrics and things like that. You need to talk about those details as well. And then, you know, similarly on like the execution question I mentioned, like that framework, you know, if someone said Instagram stories, DAU is down 6%, and I said, well, let's talk about the customers and designing new features and what their pain points are. Those don't quite go together, right? Like maybe they're sort of loosely connected, but if it's an issue where it's an executional issue, you want to start thinking about, well, what could have gone wrong? And there's certain buckets of issues that could have gone wrong. And so you basically need to build your intuition by doing more of these questions and building that mental map of, hey, this is an issue about design. It means I'm really going to make sure I need to drill down in probably these 3 or 4 buckets. Or this is an issue about execution. I'm really going to need to drill down on those type of issues.
Yeah, that is a really good answer, Kenton, because obviously, as you said, like different questions require different approaches. And I think personally, product management relates a lot to be an art of a good storyteller. So the more structured and a better storyteller you are, it's better to hear from a interviewer's perspective. So next question we have, it's kind of specific to you, Kenton, that why did you decide to leave product management or like a job as a product manager?
It's a good question. So I was really interested in, well, one thing let me back up. I feel that I'm still sort of a product manager today. It's just that I'm a product manager at my own company. A lot of the things I do on a day-to-day basis are still thinking about what features are we going to launch, in what order, and to meet what needs. A lot of the issues we talked about earlier today are things that I still focus on. But in terms of like why do that in the context of starting your own company versus a big company, I felt that at the point that I left to start RocketBlocks full time, I had a lot of experience. I'd gotten a lot of great experience doing product management. And one of the things that will happen at a certain level, like once you're at, say, the director level or higher in product management, the bulk of your job is actually managing and mentoring your team. And it's at big tech companies, it's about, for lack of a better word, politicking and working with the other directors and VPs to sort of horse trade and figure out, okay, how many team members are going to work on this, and is our team building this, and does it overlap with what your team's doing, etc. And some of those issues I find personally less interesting to solve than core product issues. So like actually building the product and getting your hands dirty. And so for me, that was a big impetus. And then I think the other reason that's just super personal to me is I had been interested in this idea of RocketBlocks and trying to help people prepare for their interviews in a very specific way for a long time. Like I said earlier, at some point, I think of it like a digital gym. And that idea, I didn't see other folks out there doing it. And I wanted something like that to exist.
Yep, that's a really good answer. And if Kenton wouldn't have started RocketBlocks, how would we have this session today? So yeah, thank you so much. So with the interest of time, this will be our last question. And I'd pick up the question from Charles because I think it's a good one. During Google interview, interviewers often ask a 10x or moonshot idea that interviewee have. How should we approach this question?
Good question. And Google does love to ask that type of stuff. I think what you want to do at a high level is still similar to some of the stuff we were talking about from a process perspective. Like you want to think through, if we're going to pick a moonshot idea, how do we actually define what is a moonshot? Like, what is that criteria? So it's 10x. Is it that mean it's $1 billion idea, $10 billion idea, $100 billion idea? So start by like putting some constraints in place. Like, what is a moonshot really? And then once you've got some of those constraints, you can think about, okay, well, now I've got some constraints. I'm going to say a Moonshot is a $10 billion business. Okay, there's not a lot of businesses that can all be $10 billion businesses. So that's going to limit some stuff right off the bat. And so we could say, okay, what is a $10 billion business? We could think about, okay, what are some of the big industry verticals? Maybe we could go into auto, do self-driving cars. Healthcare is 33% of the US economy. That's, what is that, $5.4 trillion or something. So there's a lot of opportunity there. I bet there's some healthcare ideas we could pursue. So one is like setting up some constraints, then applying some of those constraints. And then you've got to think about, okay, I'm going to pick one of those ideas and run with it. And I think where you end up picking an idea, that is probably highly personal to you. Like, what do you have some passion and interest in and know a little bit about? Like, it would be really hard for me to pick healthcare in that example because I just don't understand the healthcare space very well. But, I know a little bit more about maybe like streaming music. And so I might say, okay, maybe there's a play that Google could do in streaming music. That's a massive business. We know there's big competitors there. We know there's a big opportunity. And then you can start sort of evaluating, does that actually make sense for Google and how could they actually play in that space? So that's how I'd approach it.
Yeah, I mean, for Moonshot ideas, it's kind of like you need to give a unique one, but also realistic one. I think they're kind of trying to test whether you have that capacity to think beyond. Like, okay, if you had no constraints on money, prioritization, time, how would you deal with this? So that's a very good answer, Kenton. And everybody who's had another question and wasn't answered, Kenton is in our Product Buzz Slack workspace. Feel free to shoot him a DM, but respect his time because he's a very busy guy. But to top it off, thank you so much, Kenton, for like kicking off the case study initiative. I think this was a good sense of what we are trying to do with case studies, and with your expertise, it was definitely a very entertaining case study. And to everybody who attended, if you liked this case study, feel free to follow Kenton on LinkedIn, follow RocketBlocks, and if you overall had some takeaways from the session, feel free to post it on LinkedIn, tag Kenton, tag Product Buzz, and we'd love to interact with your post. And just to top it off, we have another event coming up. And for that, I would like to hand it off to Joseph.
Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Joseph. Sorry for the messy hair. I was actually in bed for like an hour ago. So, but thank you for such an interactive session, and for asking the right questions, and thank you, Kenton, for taking the time out of your day to do this. But quick announcement. So we actually have an event coming up this Saturday at 11 a.m. PST with the CEO and founder of Product School, Carlos. And so this will be a Q&A session where you can ask some questions, anything about product management, about his role, day-to-day role, working as CEO at Product School. And you can find the link to that. We'll also post it on the announcement channel, but you can find the link to register and to submit your questions beforehand to be asked to Carlos on our LinkedIn post. But yeah, just be on the lookout for that. We're really excited to have you, and thank you again, Kenton.
Thank you guys for having me. It was great.
Thank you, Joseph. Kenton, any final words before we end our session today?
That is a good question, putting me on the spot. I hadn't thought about a final sign off, but I think I will go back to actually a point that you made at the very beginning, which I think is really important. This stuff can feel intimidating the first time you face it. And I remember the first time someone told me about a product case and the fact that there was even this thing called case interviews, and they existed in consulting as well, and that people are just going to put you on the spot solving a business problem. It is intimidating at first, but it is like anything else. Like the more you do it, you just repeat those cycles, it will get easier and easier. It's like riding a bike, and then at some point it becomes like nearly automatic. So don't get intimidated. The best thing you can do is just start doing it, just start practicing, and before you know it, you'll be a lot better.
Couldn't have said any better, Kenton. Thank you for all that advice. And as Kenton said, it's like more of a marathon rather than a sprint. So keep tuned for next case studies session. And thank you for all attending the session, and hope you all have a great rest of the day and week. See you all on Saturday.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Kenton.
Okay.